Peace be with all of you. First of all, I'd like to thank Archbishop John Wester for giving me the opportunity to share my family's experiences with the atomic bombing of Nagasaki. I am an atomic bomb survivor. My mother was pregnant with me at the time of the atomic bombing. 3 days after the bombing, she went to her parents' house. Peace be with all of you. First of all, I'd like to thank Archbishop John Wester for giving me the opportunity to share my family's experiences with the atomic bombing of Nagasaki. I am an atomic bomb survivor. My mother was pregnant with me at the time of the atomic bombing. 3 days after the bombing, she went to her parents' house near the hypocenter of the bombing and was exposed to radiation. My maternal grandmother and 2 of my aunts were killed in the bombing. My grandmother was burned all over, and she died after 6 days, suffering without treatment. One of my 2 aunts was never found. One of my cousins died of typical atomic disease at the age of 17, 14 years after the bombing. My parents, sister, and brother were also exposed to radiation. My mother and brother eventually died of cancer. I deeply regret not having the opportunity to meet my grandmother and 2 aunts because of the atomic bombing. The US government has justified dropping the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. However, from June 1944 onward, US bombers attacked about 430 Japanese cities and villages outside of Okinawa, killing approximately 250,000 people. By that time, the Japanese military had almost no weapons left. It was in this context that the atomic bombs were dropped on the 2 cities. It is said that 8,500 of Murakami's 12,000 parishioners died in the 4 months after the Nagasaki bombing. In total, 543,091 people have died from the 2 atomic bombings over the past 79 years. Many atomic bomb survivors suffered not only physically, but also mentally and psychologically, as they were discriminated against as if they had an infectious disease. As a result, many of them experienced difficulties in marriage and employment. As an atomic bomb survivor, I would like to make the following appeal. The US government should promote the abolition of nuclear weapons to compensate for the atomic bombings. Human beings who are endowed with wisdom and conscience should never be allowed to create or use nuclear weapons. I hope that more people will realize the emptiness of having nuclear weapons by first learning more actively about the misery and inhuman harm they have caused. Nuclear weapons benefit no one. They destroy all life. Eliminating nuclear weapons is the necessary first step. Thank you for your attention. I wish you have a meaningful day.
For your time and your attention. What you just saw was Archbishop Takami, who obviously his family was personally destroyed. I think that's the right word for it. Destroyed because of the bombings in Japan that we as Americans are responsible for. Let's not kid ourselves. We have to take responsibility for the actions of our government. Even though we may not have been born then, it is our time to turn it around. And that is why we are here today. And Archbishop Takami, along with our most lovely Archbishop Wester, is part of a partnership for a world without nuclear weapons. Archbishop Wester, after reflecting on his soul-stirring visit to Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 2017, realized how much his own archdiocese is steeped in the nuclear weapons industry and felt called to write about nuclear disarmament. In January of 2023, he published a pastoral letter entitled Living in the Light of Christ's Peace, a conversation towards nuclear disarmament, noting the urgency for dialogue and action towards nuclear disarmament. It was Archbishop Wester's wisdom to invite representatives of different faiths to create an interfaith committee to address this issue of nuclear abolition. And that is why we are here today, that religion will no longer be a reason to have war. That we of different faiths can be together, united for a world of dignity and peace. And with that, I'd like to introduce the Most Reverend John C. Wester to lead us in prayer and opening words.
Thank you all very much. I'm very proud and very honored to be here with you today, and thank you for your attendance. It means so much that we can come together. I see so many people that we know and so many movements and so many groups, so I'm not going to name any one for fear that I would leave one out. But you know who you all are, and I'm just so very, very grateful to all of you. I'm grateful to be part of this very important movement. It was very touching to see Archbishop Takami there in the beginning. He's such a dedicated man, a Habakasha himself, and it's just such a wonderful thing to be together. I know that our movement is, it's like swimming upstream, you know. It's not easy, and we have a lot of obstacles. But what's always impressed me about all of you, each of your groups, whether it's Tina Cordova or any of the groups, is the passion and the determination and the tenacity and the perseverance with which you come to this movement. And that's what we need. We must never let up. We have to keep fighting the good fight, as scriptures tell us, in order to get nuclear disarmament, verifiable, multilateral nuclear disarmament. So thank you all for being here. And thank to Secretary Kenny in a special way for being here with us today. What a great honor to have him here with us to give a major address. We're so grateful to him. And I'm grateful to all of you, my own staff, of course, have been working so hard, and to all of you. And so now we'll just remain seated, please, but I'll try to just begin our time together with prayer. Almighty and merciful God, creator of all that is seen and unseen, we come before you today in humility and awe. We thank you for the gift of human intelligence, for the capacity to search the mysteries of creation, and for the ability to unlock even the hidden secrets of the atom. Yet on this commemoration of the first nuclear detonation at the Trinity test site, we remember with sorrow how knowledge meant to serve life can be turned toward destruction. Lord, grant us the grace to use every science and every power entrusted to us for the good of humankind, never for warfare, domination, or fear. Jesus Christ, Prince of Peace, pour vengeance to mercy, and from the logic of weapons to the labor of peace. Accept our humble prayer, offered in remembrance and hope. By your grace, help us beat our swords into plowshares and our spears into pruning hooks, so that nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. We ask this through a loving God. Amen.
As I mentioned, dialogue is one of the key ways that we can actually break through and have a victory. And the recognition that dialogue is necessary is shared by all the faiths. The Jewish vision of the world is one of justice that requires respectful engagement and dialogue. Daisaku Ikeda, Buddhist philosopher and my mentor, wrote, "In the end, peace will not true and lasting peace will only be realized by forging life-to-life bonds of trust and friendship of the world's people. Human solidarity is built by opening up our hearts to each other. This is the power of dialogue." And in that light, we have changed our format for this year, that after every speaker, there will be 10 minutes of questions and answers. You see the 2 microphones here. If you have a question for the speaker who was just on stage, please just line up and you'll be able to ask the question so that everyone in the audience can hear, and then the presenter will hopefully answer your questions, right? Okay, so our next speaker, I'm so proud to announce, Ikeda noted the numerous problems we confront are caused by human beings, which means that they must have a human solution. However long the effort takes, so long as we do not abandon the work of unknotting the tangled threads of these interrelated issues, we can be certain of finding a way forward. And Jay has been someone who's been carrying this fight for decades. I am in awe of his dedication and his perseverance. Ladies and gentlemen, Jay Coughlin, Nuclear Watch.
Yeah. No, this is a good one. That's a good one. Okay. Okay. Right there. There you go. All right. We're good. We're good in the room. Okay, Sophie says we're good on internet. By the way, a shout out to Sophie she She's a quick study, and this is the first time she's doing this event. She's doing a great job, so thank you, Sophie. Okay, now, Thea's a hard taskmaster, and you won't, the last 4 minutes didn't count, okay, Thea? We're starting over. So, again, you know, I'm kind of like of the Watergate School of Politics, which means follow the money. And so here, you see a budget graph that Scott formulated. And right now, you know, first of all, come October 1st, Los Alamos gets a $1 billion raise for nuclear weapons programs. $1 billion. Everything else is being cut. Non-proliferation staying flat, cleanup's being cut, renewable energies deleted, gone, okay? So the next time you hear propaganda about all the good things that the laboratory does, 86% of $7 billion is for core nuclear weapons research and production programs. That's the money. And that's a quote from Bob Dylan. Money doesn't talk, it swears. Next slide, please. And then concerning all the other sites in the DOE nuclear weapons complex, you see that Los Alamos is almost double the next. And the next site with the most money is Sandia in our very own state. Now, Sandia is also in California. But this gives you a good idea of the key position that the land of enchantment plays. So next one, please. Now, what is all this money for? And it's basically for modernization. And what does modernization mean? Well, it means every warhead in the plant stockpile is going to be rebuilt, its life extended for decades, given new military characteristics, and then we're going to have new design nuclear weapons on top of that. We're going to have new production facilities that are expected to be operational until around 2080, and we're going to have new missiles, subs, and bombers. So this is $2 trillion to keep nuclear weapons forever. And meanwhile, you know, I'm a witness to this. Homelessness explodes on the streets of Santa Fe. We're threatened by, you know, forest fires, et cetera, but we're putting $2 trillion into putting into more nuclear weapons that we don't need. Okay, now, the key production item in this modernization is plutonium pit production, which is happening now at Los Alamos. And the real irony of it, and if there's any, you know, point I'd like to drive home to you all, none of this future pit production, zero, is to maintain the safety and reliability of the existing stockpile. It's all for new designs. And first of all, they can't be tested because of the international testing moratorium, or conversely, they could prompt the U.S. back into testing, after which all hell would break loose. So the National Nuclear Security Administration, semi-autonomous nuclear weapons agency within DOE, you know, this is going to be a $60 billion plus program. They don't have cost estimates for it. We don't know how much it's going to cost. Independent experts have concluded that pits last at least 85 years, and they have relatively easy fixes to make them last even longer. And then on top of this, we don't know where all the future waste will go. Now, you know, to date myself, I was 12 years old during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I was acutely aware of it, and, you know, that the world was going to end overnight. And I know I've always been spoon-fed the one-word rationale, deterrence, for all this. But, you know, first of all, there's the inconvenient fact that the U.S. was the first and only to ever use atomic weapons. And we don't really have deterrence. What we have is a hybrid of deterrence and nuclear warfighting capabilities, and that's why we have thousands of weapons instead of just a few hundred. And that's why we have a modernization program in pit production. Now, this second arms race that we're in now, in some respects, it's even more dangerous than the first. We have multiple actors, so it's much more complex. We had the threat of regional wars like India and Pakistan, and a couple of years ago they got pretty close. And now we got new weapons like cyber weapons, hypersonic weapons, and artificial intelligence. And I'm very concerned about the fact that human judgment might be sidelined in the future, and artificial intelligence tells us to go to nuclear war. Next slide, please. It is actually, believe it or not, the official policy of the U.S. to disarm. And I've had top officials tell me this, but the catch is they say it's just a matter of time. And the reason that it's actually official is because of the 1970 Non-Proliferation Treaty, in which the U.S. and the other nuclear weapons powers promised to negotiate towards nuclear disarmament. But that, of course, has never happened, and we just had a review conference that ended in failure for the third time. So, now finally, what this means in our own backyard, there is an actual struggle right now, and I believe that Secretary Kenny is going to speak to it some, but the Environment Department has ordered cleanup at one particular dump, and it's about 800 feet from the lab's plutonium pit production facility. So the lab is claiming that this particular dump is now associated with active operations just because of proximity. But I can tell you the Department of Energy and the lab are fighting NMED on this tooth and nail. And they say they'll clean up once pit production is done, which in effect means never. So next slide, please. Now, Nuke Watch was part of a lawsuit that forced the government to do this pit production programmatic environmental impact statement. And when this is done, I ask you to kindly go out, to the room you came in, but you can send comments from here on this document right now from a laptop and send it off. But we had to force the government to do an environmental review of this huge, complex program. And, it's my position, there's already existing pit production capability at Los Alamos, and that should suffice to maintain the stockpile. But, again, I reiterate, no future pit production is to maintain the existing stockpile. It's for new design weapons. And bottom line, there is no necessary pit production as things stand now. Okay, I'm getting there, Thea. I'm wrapping up. During this comment period, the United States government is withholding 3 key documents. And one of them is a new pit life study by independent scientists. And when this particular group of scientists did a study back in 2006, that's when they came to the conclusion that pits last at least 85 years and have easy fixes. So we know that the government's been holding on to a new one since the end of the year, and they're not releasing it. They're also not releasing a special study on how troubled the program is, and they're also withholding a new seismic hazard analysis for Los Alamos, which is important because that directly impacts the pit production facility. Okay, so I and others filed a Freedom of Information Act request for that pit study. And this is what I got just a couple of days ago. I got a title page, I got one completely blank page, and there's one other page that's completely blank. And I expect this current study to reaffirm what they found 20 years ago, that pits basically last a century, but this is your government withholding the information from you that you need when the government claims that one of the main reasons, one of the main drivers that they have to have pit production is because plutonium pits are aging. And I think this report right here says otherwise, but they are covering it up. Okay, last slide, and then I'm done. And this is the to-do part. I'm an activist, duh. And part of my job is to make you all active. So as I said, one thing you can do is when you leave and you go through the exit there, send a comment to the government on pit production. It includes stuff like this about how it's aging. And then another thing you can do, and you know, this is to give strokes to Secretary Kenny, but support the New Mexico Environment Department, is that for the first time that I've been familiar, or that I've been doing this work for more than 30 years, we actually have an environment department that is trying to compel genuine cleanup at Los Alamos, and also to prioritize Cold War legacy waste at the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant. And Mr. James Kenny is the man behind that, so support the New Mexico Environment Department. And then that's it. So if you got questions.
Well, for starters, these scientists did not give an expiration date. They didn't even track. So it's not like in 100 years, plutonium pits are going to turn into of 24,000 years. That means for a
I know, thank you. Can you tell him he turned it off?
So yes, and you know, I try to strive for brevity, and I always fail. But there was in 2012, there was a follow-on study by the Remembrance Lab in California, and the title of the study was "Plutonium is Aging Gracefully." And the government's not giving it to us.
Next person.
Hello, John. Little bit louder, John, in the mic.
As the government stated that the plutonium pit production is not just plutonium-239, also includes enriched uranium, which feedstock material would be used.
You know, first of all, I can't let the occasion go without saying who this guy is. He is the FBI agent who led the raid on Rocky Flats. $1989. So John, you told me that initially it was a little tense when FBI met security with both sides with guns drawn at Rocky Flats. So a little tense, huh? All right, your question was plutonium and uranium, both used in pits. You know, I don't know. The details are classified. We know that both
obviously have the inventory of Neptunium 237 on hand. And my conjecture is that since David doesn't like to explain all of the ingredients in the recipe, we are going to be
Okay, I can't really comment. Okay, thank you, John.
Next person, please.
For those that couldn't hear, a pit by itself, you can think of it as like a one-stage bomb, and that's what destroyed Nagasaki that Archbishop Joseph Tommy was talking about. But modern weapons are two-stage, so that the pit fission starts fusion in the secondary, and that's how we end up with huge H-bombs. Okay, Thea, I probably have had enough time, huh?
No, you actually have another minute or two.
Okay, come on, bring the questions.
Just quick clarification on the deadline. My understanding is that comments from you guys were due on the 16th. You're encouraging people to continue to submit them.
Yeah. So she pointed out the deadline technically ended on July 16th. And I want to point out, isn't that ironic? That was the 81st anniversary of the Trinity test. Now, the Department of Energy generally says they'll consider late comments to the extent practicable. I have to practice that word. It's practicable. So by all means, do submit comments. But the other thing is, the lawyers who represent Midwatch and a couple of other organizations that did that lawsuit. A couple of weeks ago, we sent a letter of demand for those three documents that I was talking about. And we also demanded that the comment period be extended by 30 days. Now, they're not going to honor that. But
It keeps flashing. It's been doing that all day.
That tells me more litigation later. So kind of build the case. You all please do send comments. Send it from
Channel
here.
2.
Try this.
Yes, last question.
Check your head,
Thank
please.
you. Thank you so much. It's still flashing, but
Are you getting a signal?
Trinity test. I was in Oklahoma City, and lots of my family members, aunts and uncles, have died from cancer. And I'm wondering if there was such a drift that far.
Well, allow me to introduce you to Tina Cordova, who will be speaking. Yeah, Tina says she's going to talk about that. So absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on to.
Okay, thank you, Thea.
Thank you. So in the Life of Faith, we have a prayer that goes, Allah, our sustainer, allow us to care for our environment and sustain this world for future generations. In the Navajo religion, we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. Science itself is not evil. It is how it is used that determines its value. It is an honor to have Dr. Michael Ketterer here with his biochemistry to show us how science can be an asset to human beings. Dr. Ketterer.
Thank you, everybody. And good afternoon. Muy buenas tardes.
At this pretty commemoration event, so I need to thank Archbishop John, the diocese, Tina, Jay, Bernadette, and thank you to everybody for taking your Sunday afternoon to come here. This is if we could go to my second slide, people often ask me, well, how do you come to do what you do? You know, there's many answers to that, many places I've been, worked, visited, and so forth. And, you know, I take away something from all of these, but if you go one more slide forward, the single thing that I want to tell you about myself is that I'm a downwinder, and this is my film badge. I was born in the latter years of the baby boom era, so that's me, that little guy hiding behind mom, during one of the hot years, 1963, 1964, somewhere in there. That's my film badge. I lived in western New York. This is 43 degrees north. It's about one of the highest deposition places in North America during the 60s. I'm okay so far, knock on wood, but I'm a downwinder, and later on I moved to Colorado, and I'm a Rocky Flats downwinder. I lived down in the Rocky Flats and several of the zip codes that are now in the new proposed RICO. And I was working for EPA at the same time that John Lipsky was raiding the FBI, and I cooperated with them. So I'm a downwinder that way too. But we were all exposed. If we all look at our background, where we lived, even if you were born yesterday, you are living out there in this world of downwind stuff. But if you're a baby boomer, late baby boomer like me, when you were young, you got soaked. You got soaked with fallout. Doesn't matter where you were, anywhere near the surface. So we can go ahead. Today, I'm several decades later doing a lot of things. I'm working with Veterans for Peace here in New Mexico, and we have constructed a mobile environmental testing laboratory. You might see it out in the parking lot on the way in. It's kind of like a mom and pop camper. This is called the Art Radcliffe Laboratory. Art was the VFP member, Vietnam vet, who had the vision of donating this to our project, and we have turned it into a mobile mass spec lab, so we can take it around different places. We were in Canyon City, Colorado for a couple of weeks. We analyzed 300-ish water samples, and we told the community and the media and the elected officials that there's a drinking problem here in the water. It's above the MCL. And today, that community has found itself in the newly proposed RICO because they have been affected. Coldwater Creek West is Canyon City, Colorado. That's what I said. If we could go ahead, this is just a peek inside the mobile lab that's testing water and soil and air and that sort of thing that we can do. If we can go ahead again. So, if this was going to be just a normal scientific talk for me, I'd probably go on to tell you all about the science that we're doing with this mobile lab and what I've learned about plutonium from near Trinity and what I've found out about the vetting, the 2020.
No, it's not it's not coming through on the camera at all.
I'll tell you all about that.
Huh.
I tell you about Acid Canyon. Acid Canyon, not far from here, is 80. You heard me right. 80 picojoules per liter of plutonium in water. Now, here's what sticks in my craw about that. In Colorado, where I live, and where there's the former pit factory, the standard is 0.15. 0.15. So why cannot the Department of Energy comply with 0.15 here? We hate hypocrisy. I do. I'm just pointing that out. I don't vote here, but Colorado has this standard. Anyway, I could tell you about a lot of those things. Acid canyon, the chemical properties of the plutonium in the water and so on. Isotope fingerprinting of plutonium and so on. Why do I have this up here? Because for many, many years, I knew nothing really about New Mexico and all of the things that are in this room. This is my knowledge of New Mexico. I went like this. I could tell you where I got snagged for going a little fast on the Laguna Nation. Where, you know, which was my favorite gas station in Wagon Mountain and why. I could tell you those couldn't tell you about the things here in this room that matter. I was ignorant, sure, educated and knowledgeable, but ignorant is the same. So, what I really want to tell you about today, though, is one topic about plutonium that's relevant here that's extremely important. If we could go ahead to the next slide. And that's para-occupational contamination, namely take-home contamination. So, we think of the workplace as somewhere where we go and we have PPE and protection. I learned that when I was working for the US EPA in the late 1980s. I learned to do things that way, which can help. Even in 1951, people knew, well, if people are exposed to plutonium and so forth, they have to wear special work clothes, have a laundry facility at work, and not take their contamination home. That was known in 1951. Was it always done that way? I don't think so. So many of you in Mexico are familiar with the prize-winning journalism of Dr. Alicia Guzman, who wrote about the sad, tragic story of Epifanio Trujillo and Cosme Romero. I refer you to Searchlight in Mexico. You can find that there. There, Truchas, and I'll summarize. So Mr. Romero worked for Zia in the 50s and the 60s, and Epifanio was his mother-in-law, and Josh was close to home some of the time and so forth. Mrs. Trujillo died in 1972, and she was autopsied at Los Alamos Medical Center
Audio signal there now.
without familial consent or authorization. In 1979, the results were published without name recognition in Health Physics. I went and looked at that set of results, and the concentration of plutonium in Ms. Trujillo's liver was well within the range of occupationally exposed Rocky Flats workers at that time in the 1970s. Well within that range. So think about that. The Romero family in 2023, they join us decades later after it's happened by Alicia Guzman is the one who's told this story. And Romero's found it out from somebody their family knows from their own village, a fellow Truchina. So, I had my stuff ready and we went to the Truchas. That's the easy part. I've done things like that on similar cases in Ohio. And sure enough, Romero sisters said, yes, we have some of those kind of artifacts. So I had to be spiritually prepared because it was like, this is a story that I know I've already been written into. I know what is coming. I know what the answer can be. So I went and I met Romero, and then they graciously opened their story, talking through this, explained the science, how plutonium and fingerprinting that works and so forth. I shared my own stories. We found it a lot of fun. We hugged and cried. I didn't really realize that I wouldn't see more of that. And she passed away not too long after that. But it took me until the end of 2024. We could go ahead. Next slide. It took me till the end of 2024 and the beginning of 2025 to find out what's going on. And I can't forget these sledgehammer blows to my spirit right when I'm sitting in front of the master counter computer screen. 40% uranium-235 is the isotopic composition of one of the samples. Another one is a dead match for acid canyon. These match places Mr. Romero worked. Let's see it. All of these samples have very, very high activities that we just cannot explain except by a mechanism like this take-home contamination. I knew. So it was challenging to present all this to the Romeros, but the Holy Spirit came to my help here and prepared me, and I wrote my report and I presented it to the members. If we could go to the next one. The second part came along, and that was no less challenging spiritually, because what we wanted to find out is on the family's mind and my mind too. Is their house clean today? Is this okay today? So I went back, took more samples, got some vacuum cleaners, got some wipes, wiped up around some areas in the house, and I was prepared for the worst, you might say, but it wasn't necessary to have that conversation, because what I found, I could summarize it, is it's almost like a miracle that I'm not finding any non-naturally occurring uranium in your vacuum cleaner bag. I'm not finding it. I am not finding weapons-grade plutonium in the house. I'm having trouble finding tiny amounts of plutonium in the vacuum cleaner bags, and it looks like soil in the yard. Conclusion. It's not there. It's not there. The house seems okay. Good news. If we could go one more slide here. One more, please. Oh, no, sorry. Right there. Forensic science is actually pretty good at looking for tiny breadcrumbs, and in this case there are some. I went into a piano that had to be older than the date is the Second World War started, in the 1930s or earlier. I went in there, I wiped up dirt. Yes, there's a little bit of enriched uranium there. So, there's also a little bit of I took this photo last year on July 15th, and I'm calling it Thinking of New Mexico's Last Innocent Sunset, because I had in mind that the next day, that innocent was lost. It was lost for many of you in this room. It was lost for the Romero family. They were harmed. Many of you were harmed. If we could go to the final slide, I'd just like to conclude with just a couple moments of silent prayer of your choosing for the Romero family, because I just can't fathom the harm that has been caused by this. Thank you.
We have about 5 minutes for any questions and answers for Dr. Taylor. Anyone have any questions, please go to the mic. Sir, go to the mic so we can hear your questions, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I've been told that Jemez Pueblo maintains an air filtration system in the Valles Caldera under contract with LANL, and that air filtration system finds fugitive radionuclides that can only come from LANL. That's the first part of the question, including plutonium, I was told. Now, if that's true, which I believe it's true, but I haven't fact-checked it, and I'm wondering if you've heard anything about that. And secondly, does that mean that there is fugitive plutonium from LANL throughout New Mexico?
Well, I think I can comment on both of those. I'm not exactly familiar where this Jemez monitor is, but it's being represented that they're detecting dust that came from LANL. Again, I don't know where this is, but I would say anywhere in the proximity of a few miles of the laboratory that's going properly for threshold. I imagine that I would expect to be detecting small amounts of LANL-originating uranium and plutonium in the I think it's a source of fugitive dust that goes wherever the wind blows.
isotope ratios, whose is whose, and the stuff from the Pajarito Plateau contrasts very nicely with
I've taken some samples from your White Rock, and the quantities of PU that are from the plateau are pretty small. It's a minor component even that close. But that's a very important question that you have to answer. The isotope measurements that I make, it hits me on the head. If it's from the global background, 240 over 239, 0.18. If it's from the Pajarito Plateau, it's around 0.05. And then it makes it like
Dennis, White Rock, you yourself have detected fugitive plutonium from Marcellus. Has anyone else detected it anywhere else outside of the county, Marcellus County?
well, I don't know. You have to ask them. The reason I say what I did about what I detected where it was because the sample had a 240 over
39 ratio.
is too low to be able to fall out under. So it's like you got some white paint and somebody poured some gray in it. Pour some black in it and make some gray.
Thank you.
Okay, we have time for one more question, the young lady.
Hi, were you able to test any of the water that would affect San Ildefonso Pueblo and, with being part of the aquifer that affects San Jose?
Well, there are contaminated streams of water that come down from the Pajarito Plateau. So far, about all that I've done is tested the 2024
Summer monsoon water.
up by Acid Canyon. But I have little doubt that, contaminated material is going downstream to the Ildefonso Pueblo, not only on the surface, but of course underground. We're concerned about all of those things. And, the chemical properties of all these substances, they don't care what the jurisdictional boundaries are or what people's intents were or are.
Thank you, Dr. Kevin. By Simon Gale introduced new revolution, the idea that one person's inner change can change the world. He wrote, "A great human revolution in just a single individual will enable a change in the destiny of all humankind." A perfect example of this is Tina Cordova, who was one of the co-founders of the Downwinders Consortium. Ladies and gentlemen, Tina Cordova.
Well, first of all, I want to thank all of you for being with us here today. It's so important to hear all of this information and to have it shared with us. Because I say that 84 years ago when they came to New Mexico and we had the first nuclear renaissance, no one informed us. We didn't know what was going on. No way of understanding what it all meant. But this time, we go through it with our eyes wide open. And shame on us if we don't all group together to stand up as vehemently and as strongly as we can. Thank you. The TPDC, Two Worlds Basin Downwinders Consortium, is a structured organization. We have a steering committee. We meet every Monday night almost without fail for the last 14 years. It's how we chart our strategies. It's how we become effective advocates. And with me today is one of the members of our steering committee, Bernice Gutierrez, and her husband and volunteer, Toby Gutierrez. Can you stand up, please? Bernice was born 8 days before the bomb was detonated in the town of Carrizozo, 35 miles from ground zero. Bernice's family has suffered the consequences ever since. The wonderful thing about Bernice is that she took months and months and months to explore the data that's available to us on the babies that died that summer after Trinity. And we lost thousands of babies in New Mexico, never acknowledged, but we have the data and we're looking for an epidemiologist to review that that data so that they can do a formal presentation of what Bernice has uncovered. I also want to recognize Paul Pino. Paul is a member of our steering committee, and he wrote the anthem that's our fight song. You guys will get to hear it a little bit later, and we're grateful to have Paul with us. He also is from Parazolia, has contributed greatly, traveled all over the United States and to Amsterdam recently when they screened our documentary there. So Paul, do you want to stand up and thank you for your contributions? We have a number of other members that aren't here with us today, but they all contribute greatly. If you've not seen our art exhibit in Albuquerque at the National Hispanic Cultural Center, I would invite you to do so. It's going to be there on display until January of 2027. First slide, please. So I already went through this. Next slide. So the objectives of my presentation today is to talk to you a little bit about Trinity, what made it unique and so fallout producing. Talk to you about our lifestyles in 1945 that predisposed us for a terrible outcome of an atomic bomb. And then I'm going to go into a little bit of family history and the effects of all of that. And finally, I'm going to talk about the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. Next slide. So the Trinity bomb was the first of its kind. The people of New Mexico were the first people exposed to radiation any place in the world as a result of the nuclear bomb. I want to express that there was no warning before or afterwards, and I've already said that, I think. And that was very important, and I'll explain in a moment why. Now, people tell me all the time, Tina, they didn't know what they were doing, and that's absolutely not true. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were producing a bomb of mass destruction, and they knew that fallout was going to spread all over the state. And why did they know? Because they conducted a pretest in May of that year, where they took 100 tons of conventional explosives, they laced it with radiation, and they detonated it. And then they tracked the fallout. And fallout went in every direction, and that bomb was far smaller than Trinity, so they knew that it was going to create massive fallout. They detonated the bomb on a platform 100 feet off the ground, which meant that the blast came down, intercepted the earth, took up an enormous amount of dirt, sand, animal, and plant life, incinerated it. The bomb created 10,000 times the heat of the sun. That fireball rose 50 to 70,000 feet into the air, higher than the atmosphere, penetrating the stratosphere. The bomb was also incredibly inefficient. They packed it with 13 pounds of weapons-grade plutonium. Only 3 pounds were necessary for the fission process. That means a complete 10 pounds of plutonium went up and was dispersed all over our state. The blast was seen for hundreds of miles away, and as you can well imagine, when that ash went up, it had to come down, and it blanketed our state for days afterwards. And there was a question earlier about Oklahoma. And let me just say this much. For years, we had hoped that we could find a scientist that would recreate the blast and use today's technology and historical weather data and then map out the fallout. And a scientist from Princeton, he's now in Milwaukee, his name's Sebastian Philippe, he did just that. He did the fallout mapping for Trinity, and when he found what he found, he decided to do it for the 93 other blasts that actually detonated in the desert of Nevada. And what will those findings show? They're going to show that Trinity irradiated 46 states, parts of Canada, and Mexico. So yes, people in Oklahoma were very likely affected. And when he took and compared that to also the 93 blasts in Nevada, what he's going to show very soon to be published, peer-reviewed documents, what he's going to show is that New Mexico is the second most irradiated state during the above-ground testing that took place. The second most irradiated state, only second to Nevada. Next slide. So our lifestyles predisposed us, and why is that? Well, mostly because in all the small towns across New Mexico, we didn't have running water. So we depended on the rain that fell from the sky. We collected it in cisterns. We had our acequias. We had rivers, lakes, holding ponds. In Parazolia, they had a holding pond north of town. And people would go every day and dip water out of there that they needed for sustenance. And people's cisterns, they directed the water off their roofs into these enclosed containers. And of course, any radioactive debris that fell in that ash would become part of their cisterns. So no running water. We depended on the rain that fell. It was July, our rainy season, when we actually had a rainy season. And that's when these systems would be charging up.
We also didn't have electricity ready available in everyone's home, so we had no refrigeration. You couldn't go to a grocery store and buy things like produce, meat, dairy. You only had mercantile stores, and they sold things like sugar, flour, coffee, rice, cereal, but they didn't sell any dairy, any produce, or any meat. People produced all those things at their own homes. So there's three essential ways that you're exposed. Inhalation, which would have been taking place as the ash fell from the sky. There's absorption through your skin, and if you don't have a chance to bathe every day
because you don't have running water, then that radiation would have stayed on your skin and you would have been absorbing it. And then the last one is ingestion, which I described already. Next slide. So the documented effects. Well, I already mentioned the babies that died that summer, and they died in the way that you would expect them to die if they had been overexposed to radiation. Their gastrointestinal tracts could not function properly. They couldn't hold anything down. The list of things that Bernice uncovered is actually horrifying. The number of congenital malformations, the number of stillbirths, the number of babies that died a few months after they were born from what was described as summer diarrhea, but there was no cholera outbreak, there was nothing that would contribute to something like that. We've done that research. And secondly, at that time, we did have antibiotics that worked against those sorts of things. The only thing that you can point a finger to is radiation exposure. And by the way, the mothers would have been concentrating the radiation in the mammary glands, like all mammals do, and the only form of sustenance for children back then, babies, would have been breastfeeding, and so the mothers would have been poisoning their children without any knowledge. In my own family, I'm the fourth generation to have cancer since 1945. I have two great-grandfathers alive at the time, living 45 miles from ground zero. In 1955, they were both told they had stomach cancer. We'll never know because we didn't have diagnostic process back then. They were given morphine and sent home, and they died. They suffered a great deal, and then they died. My mom always says that she actually really was nervous about visiting her grandfather because she was afraid she would catch what he had. We didn't know cancer. We didn't understand cancer. We had never heard those words in 1955 in our little community. My dad died after having 3 different cancers he didn't have risk factors for, except that he was a 4-year-old child drinking mass quantities of fresh cow's milk and dipping water out of the cistern. Both my grandmothers had cancer who were alive at the time of Trinity. I'm a cancer survivor. My youngest brother was diagnosed with cancer 18 months ago. I only have 2 brothers. I only have 1 sister, she's had cancer. My mom's being followed for a tumor that so far is benign. And if that weren't enough, the 5th generation has developed in my family now because I have a niece who's 27, and at the age of 23, she was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. My family is not unique, folks. Our organization has been collecting health surveys for 19 years, and we've documented thousands of families in New Mexico displaying 4 and 5 generations. And I would bet that there's many of you in this room today that can speak to this in your own family. Next slide. So we organized locally, and in the beginning, nobody wanted to hear this story. Nobody believed this story. Nobody understood this story. People just knew there was a lot of cancer in their family, but they didn't know or understand why. And we started a dialogue and gave people a safe place to come forward and talk about this. And what we discovered was profound, just profound. And now, this story, our history is known locally, nationally, and internationally. We get interviewed by journalists from all over the world now, and our history has been told all over the world. They're going to screen our documentary in Perth, Australia, this month. Like I mentioned, we've been in Amsterdam. We've been interviewed by countless journalists from countries all around the world, and I'm very proud today to announce publicly that in August, on August 31st, I've been invited to speak to the General Assembly of the United Nations. And for the first time ever in the halls of the United Nations, they're going to hear the words Twarosa. and Carrizozo, and Alamogordo, and Socorro. And I would be so proud to take our history there. And so now people internationally know about this history. So we finally achieved a measure of justice a year ago in July when they finally passed the expansion to the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. And people are receiving their money. And we are so grateful. As of last week, over $50 million in compensation has been paid to New Mexicans. We have over 4,000 claims pending, which would be $400 million. And I've been saying this for years, and I think people thought I was crazy. We're not going to bring millions of dollars back to New Mexico, people. We're going to bring billions of dollars back to New Mexico through this process. I need everybody in this room to tell everybody else that they know about this compensation. We've done everything we can to get the word out, but we need to spread the word far and wide. It's very straightforward. You have to prove that you lived here for 1 year between 1944 and 1962, and you have to have one of the 19 compensable cancers. You can apply on behalf of a deceased spouse, a deceased child, a deceased grandparent or parent. I'm not going to say that the process is easy, but it certainly is doable, and we have volunteers. I want to thank Secretary Kenny, because his office has put forward a couple of volunteers to help people file claims. And there's other people in the room who have volunteered and stepped up to help us file claims. We have volunteers from one end of the state to the other. But our fight is not over. And very soon I'm going to come back to all of you again and ask you to make phone calls and stand up with us, because this week they introduced a new bill in Congress that will add back the health care coverage. It'll add additional cancers that are not covered, like, as an example, prostate cancer is not covered, although it's the leading cause of cancer in men in New Mexico. Skin cancer is not covered, bone cancer, all cancers that we know are radiogenic. It's going to add those places that are left out, like Colorado, which we've been fighting for, Montana, all of Arizona, all of Nevada, Guam, places that should not be left out. I've taken to saying lately, we're not going to stand for justice for just a few, we only stand for justice for all. And until all of our brothers and sisters are added, we will not stop fighting for justice. We have a table in the lobby. Please, during the break and at the end of this, come to our table. We have all the information that you're going to need to learn about the compensation. We have some of the applications available for people who would like to take a look at it. Please only do this online. They have lost people's paperwork. Please only do it online. And secondly, do not think that you have to hire an agency or an attorney to help you do this. They're going to take a percentage of your claim. The check goes to them. They get to deduct whatever they think they deserve, and then they send you the remainder. Do not go down that road. You still have to be the one that comes up with all the documentation. So I'm going to end on that note, and I'm just going to say also we have this award-winning documentary called First We Bomb New Mexico. It's available to screen in communities. It has screened, like I said, in many, many places. It's won awards at film festivals all over the world. There's a screening feed that you can go to their website and learn more about it. We need a streamer. For all of you who are here today, Secretary Kenny, I'm going to call on you also. Please tell our governor that we have this really thriving, somewhat thriving these days, moving industry in New Mexico. We need a streamer. Netflix should be breaking down our door to pick this film up. And I think I'll end with that, Thea. Thank you.
At this point, ladies and gentlemen,
Nathia, I want to say how much, I want to express to Archbishop Wester how much I appreciate you, Archbishop Wester. I remember that first blessing in the cathedral. There's so many people that appreciated that. I want to thank Dr. Ketter for being so brave to come here and assist us and give us the scientific voice. I want to thank Jay for always supporting this, and Naya, who's going to do a wonderful presentation, and Secretary Kenny also for being present today, and all the volunteers that helped put this together. We've been working on it for months.
I believe there's one question, sir, if you'd like to do that, thank you.
I'll repeat the question. So the question was, do I believe for those people who got cancer after Trinity, that was due to Trinity and the fallout, or was it genetic? I hope I said that correctly. People born after Trinity. The answer is, your exposure doesn't end the day of the detonation, it's just the beginning, because of the half-life of the radioactive isotopes that are produced by the bomb. And the truth is, we had monitoring stations in New Mexico through the end of the testing that took place in Nevada, and we regularly received dosing from the Nevada test site. And so when you're talking about radioactive isotopes like strontium and cesium with half-lives of over 30 years, you can imagine that after Trinity, we only reached the first half-life of those radioactive isotopes, much less plutonium that has a half-life of 24,000 years. So what I often say to people is, we don't know what we don't know, because our government never returned to do any kind of epidemiological study, number one, and they've never done an environmental assessment. And so, do I believe that we got it from Trinity? I believe we got it from Trinity and Nevada and the works that still continue at Los Alamos. We still continue to receive exposure to things because we don't know what we don't know. And so, do I trust our environment? No, I do not trust our environment. And I think that the new bill that just got introduced is going to extend the qualification period to 1992, and that's not even adequate. That's not even adequate. And guess what else? They tell us these things are safe, and they are right up until the moment they're not, and then it's catastrophic and nobody comes back. We have wildfires that threaten our nuclear waste storage here. We have so many different things that threaten our well-being here, and right now, and Naya's going to talk about it, they want to start, mining uranium again, and we haven't cleaned up the Superfund sites. There's no regard or respect shown to the people of New Mexico. It's been an invasion of our lands and our lives with no regard or respect shown to the people of New Mexico.
I also want to acknowledge St. Michael's High School for hosting this event, and their students and some of the parents have a concession stand. Please visit it. They have some really good food there. Thank you so much. We'll see you in 20 minutes.
Test, test.
gentlemen, the second half will start in about 5 minutes, so please take your seats or anything else you need to do. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to please take your seats. We'll be starting in just a moment.
All good? What's the matter?
For our food, it ain't over till we win. It ain't over till we win. So all you downwinders, come on over, First Nation people. Come on over, you radium miners. Come on over, sister warriors. Come on over,
Luisa Lopez, the first time that you all went to Washington, D.C. to fight for us. And it's based on El Rancho Grande. But it's a half of a song. Allá en el rancho chico tiraban una bomba. Dijeron que le hace, aquí no vive nadie, no vamos a hacer daño. Comenzaron a morirse de cáncer y tumores y ahora están enterrados bajo de las flores. Out there on Rancho Chico, they bombed the land to hell. They said it doesn't matter, there ain't nobody out here, we won't cause any problems.
That's what I mean. We're trying to get you straight.
Then we started dying from cancer to mortis, and now we are buried under
And I was like,
the Flores aquí en Rancho Chico. Thank you, Luisa.
I'm with Embarrassment.
This way, the camera's.
Absolutely.
So he's asking.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we're good. Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying. As we continue, it is the youth that need to lead us. It is the youth that we are leaving this planet to. So it is so important that we have someone who is leading the way for the younger generations to be able to own what is rightfully theirs, an earth and a planet that they can live in and on without fear. It is with my great honor that I can introduce a young woman whose passion for her native people, as well as for all who live in New Mexico, is as admirable. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Naya, and Naya, I have terrible times with names, okay. So I'm just gonna call her Naya, come on out, okay. She'll introduce herself. It's important to have someone from the Pueblos here, and she honors us all with her presence.
Thank you for that introduction. Good afternoon. Kuati Hopa Dushanomnet Amaeta Akumeshita Yakaguchini Shanashita. I introduced myself in my language of Karis from the Pueblo of Acoma, and I have a photo that I think we'll show in a second Acoma is one of the western pueblos, 60 miles west of Albuquerque. And the photo that I'm going to pull up is from one of our water holes, and it's showing women where we would gather and harvest rainwater with the pottery, and we would use that to sustain ourselves. And I appreciated Tina talking about how being land-based peoples makes us more susceptible to the violence, to the environmental violence and extraction that is happening, and I'll talk more about that. But my community, is the photo showing up? I can't tell. So my community of Acoma is about 20 miles southwest from what once was the largest open pit uranium mine in the world, the Jackpile Pawadi mine, which operated from 1953 to 1982. Pawadi is one of the 6 Laguna Pueblo villages, and Acoma is also in close proximity, about 20 miles east from the Grants uranium mining district, where many of our people were employed in Jackpile and in Grants and the different mines there. And like Tina, again, how she mentioned, I grew up with these stories of grandparents, of people who worked in the mines, and how they were never educated or even told about what they were being exposed to, what uranium was, what radiation exposure was. We hear stories of our grandparents, our grandfathers coming home from work covered in uranium dust, and the kids coming up to hug them, and the mothers who were in the home washing their clothes, and how this just exposed entire generations to radiation. And this was intentional. It was something I'm going to really talk about today. I was asked to talk about specifically uranium mining, and I will, but I also think it's important to connect uranium and some of the other topics that you've heard about today to the environmental violence and colonization that continues to happen to indigenous peoples around the globe. And so the introduction of uranium mining in my community with not only Jackpile but the mines and Grants shifted us away from these value-based economies that we once had as Pueblo people and as indigenous people, as farmers, as land-based people. Pueblo people and people in Acoma, we cultivated thriving food networks. We growed our own food, we foraged the natural plants. And when colonization came, when the first contact of Europeans came to our community, they saw this place that they considered desolate and that no life could thrive. This kind of term emerged of like the desert as a wasteland. And this kind of terminology is really what contributes to New Mexico being designated as a sacrifice zone. And the stories and the ways that the things that I grew up hearing are so different. We had so much abundance at one time, and we had such a different way of life that was not acknowledged. And the mines really moved us away from this. And another impact of the mines that I want to talk about in my community is the way it shifted gender roles and the entire structure of the way we functioned. Laguna with the Jackpile mine was one of the first Pueblo communities to actually enter into wage owning. So men were the first to be employed in the mines, and now all of a sudden men are the first ones who have an income. They're the first ones to have power outside of our community, and the women don't. And they're going to work every day, and they're working with white men, and hearing the way that those men talk about their women, and how this, and there were also bars that were established around the mines, and so they're going out and drinking after work, and how this really just completely shifted the way our community functioned. This was the introduction of sexual violence in our community. It was the introduction of substance abuse and alcoholism. And just that we've heard about a lot about the exposures and the effects of exposures to family and children, and how it's passed on through mothers. Radiation exists in the womb and it exists in breast milk, and how that's just passed on through generations and generations. And I feel like I can't talk about the history of extraction on the indigenous land and the narratives that led us to being places to experience so much environmental violence without acknowledging that this narrative and this classification of us began with, as I mentioned, the European and Spanish contact who brought Catholicism to our communities, and how this was also the introduction of the same ideas about women and about patriarchy that have left a lasting impact on us. And I appreciate and want to acknowledge the Archbishop and the Archdiocese for hosting this event. And I also want to say that the Catholic Church and anyone who is a leader in this space really has a great responsibility to my people, to Indigenous peoples around the world, to be on the front lines of this anti-nuclear movement as one way to right the wrongs and the irreversible damage that this institution has caused to Indigenous people around the world. And so, in this way, uranium is something that connects us, that connects me to Indigenous people around the world, where our lands are mined to sustain the entirety of the nuclear fuel chain. New Mexico, as people have mentioned today, New Mexico and our small land-based communities are places that have experienced every part of the cycle of the nuclear fuel chain. And so today we're here acknowledging the anniversary of the Trinity test and the devastation that occurred to people in the Tularosa Basin, and it is also the anniversary of the church rock spill, which was the largest accidental release of radioactive material in the US, and that occurred on the Navajo Nation, and mostly got no media attention or still reparations to the people who are still feeling those impacts. And the uranium that was mined in Church Rock in Navajo Nation was used to fuel the Manhattan Project, which was responsible for the Trinity test. And uranium mined in Indigenous communities is sent to Los Alamos and other facilities that are building nuclear weapons, which are then used by the US military, whose legacy and continued actions are destabilizing populations across the world, or they're sent to nation states like Israel, who have illegal nuclear weapons that are used to commit genocide on Palestinians. So we can see how all of these things, how all of these occurrences are connected. So that history and legacy is why I am here today, and why many of us are here today to oppose the new uranium mine, the proposed uranium mines. I'm going to talk specifically about the ones in the Laguna-Acoma area near Mount Taylor, which is one of our sacred mountains to Pueblo people, but also to Navajo people. There's two, the Roca Honda and the La Jara Mesa mines are two mines that are on the federal fast track list and are on the border of Mount Taylor, our sacred mountain. Roca Honda is owned by Energy Fuels, which is a company that also owns the Piñon Plain uranium mine near Grand Canyon, Arizona, and they are operating the only uranium mill in the country. And so we're really worried specifically about that mine because of the operations that Energy Fuels is currently undergoing. So written comments on the Roca Honda mine are actually due today, and they're being accepted by the New Mexico Mining and Minerals. Our opposition to this new mining is just rooted, as I've mentioned, in these decades of lived experiences, and just all the ways that our communities have been forced to bear these environmental and health burdens long after these mine companies move on and leave us with their contamination and just basically do nothing about that. And so something I want to also mention is just some of what we might be hearing on a federal level currently about nuclear power plants. And under the Trump administration, there's a narrative that is going around that we are in this energy emergency, and the priority of the administration is to create domestic energy supply. And anytime you hear that, what that means is that more uranium will be mined on indigenous land. We are hearing of new technologies like ISR, in situ recovery mining, or circular mining, these new technologies that are being touted as ways to extract more uranium without the environmental consequences, saying like, in the past, these companies didn't know what they're doing, and now we do, and now we can do it in this different way, and it's just not true. And these technologies and a lot of these companies are specifically targeting tribal leaders, and I've seen this happen, I've witnessed this, to get them on board with leasing parts of our land or saying that we want tribal leaders to be part of building an energy future for the United States. There was something that I heard once, that in order for tribes to maintain our sovereignty, we need to keep up with the energy demands from the United States government to be able to do so, to be able to keep our sovereignty. And they know that many of these natural resources exist on tribal lands, and so they need us to be part of that conversation. And so it's really like this illusion of choice that they're putting us in, that we have a choice about what happens to our land, and that we can be part of it, and that we can profit off of it alongside them, because they will profit either way. And so I think I just want to end, I'm a little bit over, but I know the title of this event was the Anti-Nuclear Future. And so what does that really mean, and how do we create this? In my work, we do a lot of education and advocacy with youth and with all ages to really talk about the idea of an indigenous regenerative economy. How going back to these stories that are within our communities of how at one time we had economies that were self-sufficient, that had values of autonomy, that valued all the elements, water, earth, and that each living thing had a right to exist on its own, free from any extraction. And so how do we go back to that? How do we go back to using natural resources in a way that is responsible, reciprocal, and sustainable, and in a way that is completely outside of this global capitalist system that we are being forced in currently? I believe that there's a lot of young people like myself in this work because we believe that we cannot afford to lose any more of our sacred sites. We can't afford to lose any of our elders, any of our people who are dying by cancer and illnesses brought on by radiation exposure, and because we believe that it will be possible to see a world again where our people are thriving and where we're living in this reciprocity and sustainability. And I just want to appreciate Tina Cordova for inviting me here today and for all the work that you've done, and also some of our elders, Saya, Evelyn, and Kathy from Table Women United, who have been doing this work for a really long time. They are just some of my most greatest blessings in this world, and it's just, yeah, I'm very thankful for them. So thank you, and thank you everybody. Bye-bye.
Does anyone have any questions for Nara? Any comments? Please step to the mic. Oh, you're all so shy. Hi, Jody Benson. I'm up in Los Alamos. First of all, thank you for the story, the really sad story about how love passes on the contamination. So thank you for all the stories you've told. And now for the rest of us, today is the last day that you can comment to NMED about to New Mexico for Roco Hondo mine. If you get online, you can search it out, you can make comments telling them this story about why we don't want that mine. So please, everybody, be an activist and protect their people and us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next person.
Thank you, Naya. My name is Susan Gordon. I am the retired coordinator for the Multicultural Alliance for Safe Environment, working on uranium issues. And there are a number of new uranium mine proposals in not only the Grants area, but also near Church Rock. Ava Curtis and I were with the Navajo Redwater Pond Road community yesterday commemorating the spill that happened there in 1979. So there are a number of proposals that are out there. They're all very much water intensive. And that, you know, if you're sending comments, be sure to mention the water, because the ISL or ISR proposal near Grants will use a lot of water. solution, which is a technology called ablation, which is a high intensity slurry that would be used on uranium mine waste. It unfortunately then extracts uranium. They're calling it fines, but it meets the definition under the Nuclear Regulatory Commission of uranium ore. And it's really an abomination that's being pushed by the Navajo Nation EPA. Steve Edsity was at our gathering yesterday. He never said that word, ablation, though we had signs all over that we hate it. And it's really a very dangerous technology which will again be using indigenous communities as guinea pigs to test out a technology. It will still leave waste that will be dangerous for future generations. So thank you, Emma.
Thank you for mentioning water.
Thanks, Naya, for being here today. And my question is, how much sovereignty does the Pueblo have in regards to controlling the traffic going to and from the mines? Talking about being able to regulate the speed, manifest the shipments, take the driver's register like the future sexual offenders that might be, and I'm sure there'll be pushback, but is there a way that we could get more information through the Pueblos and Navajo land like that, where all of that traffic and conduct is being monitored on a daily basis? And I'm talking about even speed.
Yeah, I know that Navajo Nation, I'm forgetting the exact word, but has exerted their sovereignty by saying that they can't transport uranium through Navajo land. And so there's ways that we can do that. I can speak really only on behalf of Acoma that we don't really have much of a way to exert that sovereignty because the mines aren't directly on our land, even though Mount Taylor and that area is all ancestral Acoma land. And it's really, a lot of the times, these companies will come in and do like tribal consultation, quote unquote, but I feel like it's really bare minimum, the way that they're doing that. Sometimes tribal consultation isn't even done, or they just meet solely with our, whoever's in a leadership position in the Pueblos, and that's also not getting the voice of the entire community. So there's a lot of issues with the ways much of like native land is separated into these checkerboard. They call it checkerboard, meaning like there's BIA land, tribal land, private land, and that makes it really hard to put stops on different permitting because of the way that that was intentionally done to reservation land.
We have time for one more quick question for the young lady who's standing there.
I just had a quick comment. I wanted to say thank you so much. You're like our Shiro. You give us hope. And I'm so glad to see you here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So the next speaker, who's also a friend of mine, is here to help us. She's back from the Brink Hub. And a quote I'd like to say is, no matter how many people strive for a better world and society, or for how long, once an exchange of nuclear forces begins, all will have been for naught. The reality of the nuclear age is that we are compelled to live in constant company with the worst, the most incomprehensible and absurd danger imaginable. So we must take a stance. It was human beings who gave rise to nuclear weapons. It cannot therefore be beyond the power of human wisdom to eliminate them. That's from Daisaku Ikeda. Ladies and gentlemen, back from the Brink Hub, New Mexico, Ann Pierce Jones.
Thank you. And so much appreciation to all of our speakers today and everybody who has worked to put this event together, and to all of you especially for being here today, every single person in this room. it's time for us to stand up. You know, Jay has talked a lot over the years about New Mexico being America's nuclear colony, and he's not wrong. And we have to take control of our state. We have to change this. We have to heal society and the planet. And that said, I want to start with a couple of quotes, and these are also from Daisaku Ikeda. The first one is from a book he wrote. It's a novelized portrayal of the development of the Soka Gakkai in Japan after World War II, and kind of starting before the war ended. And it is, nothing is more barbarous than war. Nothing is more cruel. And the second one, in contrast, he wrote a second book that talks about the spread of our world peace movement across the globe. And that is, nothing is more precious than peace. Nothing brings more happiness. Peace is the most basic starting point for the advancement of humankind. When he wrote that, he's talking about October of 1960, when he took his first trip abroad, and he had been charged with his mentor by taking our Buddhist movement, our world peace movement, outside of Japan and into the world at large. It was 15 years after the end of World War II. The Cold War was in full swing, no end in sight. The doomsday clock was at 7 minutes to midnight. That was 1960, and that was exactly where the doomsday clock was when it was established in 1947. So not a lot had happened to move toward peace. So with those quotes in mind, and peace being much deeper than just not shooting each other up, okay? With these quotes in mind, I want to talk today about the Back from the Brink campaign, our New Mexico hub, and what we can do, at least from Back from the Brink's perspective, to move the country toward more sensible nuclear policies and the abolition of nuclear weapons, because every piece that everybody's doing in this room is critical. Back from the Brink is a US-based grassroots coalition, so it's not fancy people, of individuals, organizations, and elected officials who are working together to rid the world of nuclear weapons and to secure a set of 5 nuclear weapons policies that are designed to make the world safer, healthier, and more just. And the New Mexico Hub is one of just 26 local organizing and advocacy groups around the country at this point. If you look at the US map, what you see is we've got hubs down the West Coast, we've got hubs down the East Coast, one in Texas, one in Arizona, one here, a few scattered around the interior of the country. There's one in Montana, for instance. But there's a whole lot of room for development, a whole lot of the country where nothing's being done. Anyway, most of the hubs have sponsoring organizations. We do not here in New Mexico. We have a different set of conditions because of Los Alamos and Sandia and the politics around that. So what you need to start a hub is a group of at least 3 committed individuals who care and have the guts to stand up. So, after the 2024 Trinity event, and with the support of 2 other longtime SGI members dedicated to the cause of nuclear abolition, and I see Carmen Perez back in the corner, and she's one of them, and Sharon Wilson, I think, is out at our table. I filed the paperwork to start the hub. We began formal meetings in January 2025. We had a kickoff event last summer. We are planning some other stuff. And right now we have a core group of activists running the length of the state from Taos down to Las Cruces. what I can tell you also is there are, and this was, we were involved in the creation of this, Eddie Lachey, who's one of the founders of Students for Nuclear Disarmament, has worked closely with us and has been out here a couple of times to speak. Bottom line is, there are 2 Students for Nuclear Disarmament chapters here in New Mexico now within the past year, and we're going to be collaborating with them. They're unfortunately not here right now because it's summer and they're on vacation. But we really want to reach out to the youth of New Mexico. You know, it's the youth's planet going forward. For me, the hub and this work are my response to the Soka Gakkai's declaration calling for the abolition of nuclear weapons. This was issued by our second president, Jose Toda, in September of 1957. And I'm going to read just a little bit of it to you because I think it will bring home how serious it is to get rid of nukes. So bear with me for this paragraph here. Although a movement calling for a ban on the testing of atomic or nuclear weapons has arisen around the world, and remember this is 1957, it is my wish to go further, to attack the problem at its root. I want to expose and rip out the claws that lie hidden in the very depths of such weapons. I wish to declare that anyone who ventures to use nuclear weapons, regardless of their nationality or whether their country is victorious or defeated, should be sentenced to death, no exception. Why do I say this? Because we, the citizens of the world, have an inviolable right to live. Anyone who jeopardizes that right is a devil incarnate, a fiend, a monster. I propose that humankind applies in every case the death penalty to anyone responsible for using nuclear weapons, even if that person is on the winning side. Even if a country should conquer the world through the use of nuclear weapons, the conquerors must be viewed as devils, as evil incarnate. I believe that it is the mission of every member of the youth division, so that's the under 35 crowd in Japan, and we can translate that to the world now, to disseminate this idea throughout the world. So that's a pretty clear mission that we as Soka Gakkai International were given, and Soka Gakkai International is one of the sponsors of this event. The hub is a way for us to work to make that real. Some other things. We really need to reform our nuclear weapons policies. Right now, in January, the doomsday clock was set at 85 seconds to midnight. Midnight is nuclear war. This is the closest it's ever been. Okay, compare that to June of 1947 when the clock debuted on the cover of the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. It was initially set at 7 minutes to midnight. Compare it to 1963 when, after a decade of almost non-stop nuclear tests, the US and the Soviet Union signed the Partial Test Ban Treaty, ending all atmospheric nuclear testing. That didn't apply to underground. Okay. At that time, 1963, the clock was set at 12 minutes to midnight. Compared to 1991, the Cold War was over. The US and Russia had begun making cuts to their nuclear arsenals. The Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty had reduced the number of nuclear weapons deployed by the two countries. There was a series of unilateral initiatives that removed most of the intercontinental ballistic missiles and bombers in both the US and Russia, or the Soviet Union at that point, from hair trigger alert. And at that point, the bulletin said, the illusion that tens of thousands of nuclear weapons are a guarantor of national security has been stripped away. So maybe some insight into the fact that deterrence doesn't work. But you know, at that point, the clock was set at 17 minutes to midnight. Since that time, since 1991, we've been moving closer and closer to the brink of nuclear war. The clock has been moving closer to midnight. Now the U.S. and other nuclear nations, you've heard everybody talk, are building new and enhanced nuclear weapons. Right now there are more than 12,000 nuclear weapons on the planet. The U.S. and Russia have most of them. They're more powerful than what was dropped by the U.S. on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Throughout the nuclear weapons era, there have been multiple close calls, near misses due to human error, hubris, miscalculation, escalating wars, armed conflicts, and technology failures. The risk of nuclear war is real and growing, and if we want to have a planet, we need to do something about it. Right now, we've got the war in Ukraine, we've got tensions between India and Pakistan, North Korea, the Middle East, and we've got the mess in Iran. The consequences of a nuclear war would be devastating. I don't need to go into them. I think you guys are very well aware. If it happened, there wouldn't be anybody to save us. So, problems with U.S. nuclear weapons policy. We have retained the right to use nuclear weapons first, okay? That would start a nuclear war. Our president has the sole and unchecked authority to decide to launch a U.S. nuclear weapon. He doesn't have to consult anybody. Hundreds of nuclear weapons in our arsenal are still kept on hair trigger alert, so they can be launched at a moment's notice. So all of this together compounds the likelihood of an accidental, a spontaneous, and unauthorized launch, nothing good. And then there are the plans to create a whole new set of enhanced nuclear weapons. You've heard Jay speak about plutonium pit production. And then the TPNW, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, none of the nuclear armed nations have signed on to that. So we've got 5 policy issues. This is a bit political, but we have 5 policy issues that address these issues, and we're asking the United States to lead a global effort to prevent nuclear war by implementing these policy solutions. And they are actively pursuing a verifiable agreement among the nuclear-armed states to get rid of their nuclear arsenals. That's all of us that are nuclear-armed states. Renouncing the option of using nuclear weapons first. Ending the sole and unchecked authority of any U.S. president, no matter whom, to launch a nuclear attack. Taking U.S. nuclear weapons off hair trigger alert. And that refers particularly to ICBMs, missiles in underground silos, and then canceling the plan to replace the entire U.S. nuclear arsenal with enhanced nuclear weapons. So, working to get these policy solutions implemented through the legislative system is some of the core work of Back from the Brink. Right now, our hub is working to pass a memorial in the New Mexico legislature that endorses these solutions, and if it passes, it would be sent on to Washington. It would be basically our House, our Senate, our state legislature telling our congressional delegation, Trump, Congress, to get behind these solutions. The memorial was introduced in the 2026 short session. I have to really thank Senator Antoinette Cedillo Lopez for doing that to us. But what we learned, you know, this is a journey, not a sprint, and I feel like I'm kind of where Tina was at the beginning of her journey. We have a lot of education to do. We have a lot of networking to do. We ran into a particular military retiree who sits on the Rules Committee, who would at least talk, but really loves deterrence. So we're going to take this back to the 2027 60-day session. We've got a petition at our table. We would like you to sign that today to show support for this legislation. Getting it through it's going to take so many of us. Also, there are congressional back from the brink resolutions, so at the federal level, and they're gaining co-sponsors in both the House and the Senate. We have House Resolution 317 advocating for our policy planks. That has 58 co-sponsors right now. Senate Resolution 323 is a parallel piece of legislation which just has 8 co-sponsors right now. It was introduced this past July in the Senate. So in addition to our 5 core policy solutions, the federal resolutions have provisions in them asking the U.S. not to resume nuclear testing, addressing the impacted communities, and also addressing the need for a just economic transition. Because in canceling nuclear weapons and getting rid of them, the people who are working in that industry need to have something healthier to do, something comparable economically as well.
And can we go to questions now for you?
We can pretty much do that if you want to do that, yes.
Does anyone have questions for Back from the Brink for Anne? Please go to the mic. We have someone approaching.
Did I go that long over? Okay.
Thank you for the information, and this is just a general question for everybody. Someone earlier said, everybody get online and look up. I personally don't have time or resources to do that, but if we go sign up for what you just mentioned, is that good, or is that, it's really for all the different speakers. What's our next action if we're just approaching this today?
I'm going to come back up and talk about that in a minute, and at the end of the program, we're going to have some handouts that'll be at the different tables that'll summarize all of the actions you can take, because there are a lot of them.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Anyone else before we close?
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Anne. So Jane has decided to give me a break to introduce our next speaker.
So here we go, Secretary Kenny. So right here I got the official bio that the department sent. Come on, Secretary. And I'll say a few, I'll paraphrase it, and then I'll throw it away and I'll give you the unofficial bio. So don't worry, I'm not going to sandbag you. So the official bio, he's been the Environment Secretary since 2019, and he's been the longest serving Cabinet Secretary under our Governor, and during that time, and again, official bio here, central focus of Secretary Kenny has been confronting New Mexico's legacy of radioactive contamination and nuclear waste. He's advocated for accelerated cleanup at Los Alamos and strengthening oversight at the waste isolation pilot plant, and helping to keep WIP from becoming the nation's only dump ground. So that's what he's been up to. And he's been working a lot on uranium mines with the Pueblos, etc. So that's the official bio. Here comes the unofficial biography. He's the best damn Environment Secretary we've ever had. Nobody has come close. And a cynic might argue that that's a low bar, but I'm being affirmative. You know, what Mr. Kenny's been doing, Secretary Kenny has been doing, has been outstanding. And by way of example, I'll tell you what his predecessor did, okay? You know, first of all, there was a very good consent order back in 2005. So this secretary's predecessor issued more than 150 milestone extensions to the laboratory, you know, just unilaterally issued them, and then had the unmitigated gall to turn around and say that consent order wasn't working, and then behind closed doors negotiated a new deal with the laboratory. And then just to show his true environmental colors, he later resigned to become executive director of the New Mexico Oil and Gas Lobby or Council. So what I'm trying to say, that's not what this guy is. He has been out in the very front. Right now, the department has 3 active administrative compliance orders against the Department of Energy, and that's for him to speak about. But just to close, I repeat, he is by far the best secretary of the New Mexico Environment Department we've ever had, and he needs, and the state needs, your support, because we got a new governor coming in come January, and we need to help ensure his legacy. So I present to you Secretary James Trinity.
Well, now the pressure is on. Thank you, thank you. So I first wanted to thank the Archbishop, Jay, all the speakers who have come before me, and really set a great program, but one that is filled with information, but struck by the morality of the moment that we're in, and the morality of what had transpired before many of us, and maybe even in some of our lifetimes, as well as we've heard from other speakers. So thank you all for staying. I know I'm between you and dinner now, and you're probably hungry. So again, thank you for staying. I wanted to recognize that 81 years ago, as we know, New Mexico changed, the world changed. And we've heard that all throughout the presentation today. And it all changed in a moment of non-consent, a moment that nobody knew was coming. And it changed the lives of many New Mexicans, and many, as I learn all the time by great presenters that came before me, of many people around the country, or even in Canada and Mexico. But it changed the trajectory of communities, and communities like Los Alamos, like, all over the state of New Mexico, who are still dealing with the fallout of what had transpired. And so I want to be really clear that we at the Environment Department fully recognize that our past is our call to action. And I see, I don't see, I know they're here, a number of New Mexico Environment Department employees here. And I just wanted to ask them to stand for just one quick second so you can turn around and see that our bureaucrats are not just bureaucrats, they are dedicated to come here today. They chose to be here. So I appreciate them and applaud them, because they explain so much to me, and together we push each other, because without us, without the folks you see in this room who work at the Environment Department, they are your last bastion to hold the Department of Energy and NNSA accountable. They do that every day, and I'm so proud of those individuals. So we're committed to that, and I'm just going to take a little victory lap here, even though Jay gave me some good kudos. We're really proud of the fact that we're holding DOE and NNSA accountable. We don't feel like they've been held accountable, and we do want them to be accountable to all of you, to all of us. My team lives here, you live here, I live here. We're not going anywhere, and we want to be safe in the way we drink water, eat food, outdoor recreation, cultural practices for Native communities. All of that needs to be honored in the way that DOE has not honored that in the past. So here's the biggest problem DOE has, is that they've changed, Department of Energy and NNSA, here's one of their biggest problems that we don't talk about. It's not legacy waste or anything like that. We're here. I've stayed. I've invested, my team is invested, we understand that, and I say this, and I'll tell you some stories as I go along here. I was recently in Washington, D.C., meeting with the Department of Energy, and they said, look, we want to make sure that we hear your concerns because we feel as though you're very unhappy with us. And I said, this isn't about feelings. Feelings? When are we talking about feelings? This is about math. And you show me the numbers of legacy waste cleaned up at Los Alamos, moved to the waste isolation pilot plant. You show me numbers that New Mexico, that you're investing in New Mexico, and I'll show you some feelings. But until that time, you have the feelings that I have, which I'm really annoyed, I'm really bothered, and Archbishop, I apologize, I'm afraid I'm going to say something and I'm going to look at you when I say a bad word. So I'm going to try not to say anything bad. But again, this isn't about feelings. I mean, in some ways it is a lot about feelings in this room, but when it comes to legacy waste cleanup, it's not about feelings. It's about move the waste from Los Alamos and get it into WIP. So I'm going to tell you some stories now because every time you see our letters or read a headline, you're not sort of getting what we're talking about internally, okay? And I want to fill the gaps in for you so that you get a better sense of who we are and why we're doing what we're doing. So first thing is, again, I've had about 12 different site managers from Los Alamos and Carlsbad sitting in my office in Santa Fe telling me we're going to do the right thing to a team of people who haven't changed in the last 7.5 years. So we can smell when there's something rotten sitting, when there's something that needs to be taken out with the trash. And what I'll tell you is, what bothers me is when people come in my office and say, we want to invest, we want to do the right thing by you. Okay, riddle me this. Why has Lanol's environment budget dropped $50 million in the past few years? So if you want to come in and tell me we're committed to Los Alamos, but your budget tells me you're not committed to Los Alamos, $50 million reduction in cleanup money, I don't know about you all, but I don't find that to be honest. I also don't find it to be honest when, Los Alamos had their contractor N3B, and in 2021, they withheld spending $120 million for cleanup and rolled it into the next calendar year, the next fiscal year. So there's a money problem. There's a money problem in Los Alamos for cleanup. So now you can hide behind the story of, well, it's technically difficult to clean up the Los Alamos waste. I'm an engineer. We can get into the technically difficult aspects of things. I'm okay with that. But don't tell me that it's a technical problem when it's a money problem. So I'm inquisitive. Why is there a money problem? What's happening, right? It's a fair question. So I'm going to tell you another little side story. 2019, I'm in Klein's Corner. It's November 6th. It's windy. It's cold. And I'm filling up the state vehicle with gas. It wasn't an EV. So I'm filling up the state vehicle with gas, and I get a call from Washington, D.C., and they say, we're letting you know that tomorrow we're signing a settlement with Idaho National Labs that 55% of all the waste in the country will come from Idaho for the foreseeable future. All the waste. And I said, I'm sorry, I might be at Klein's Corner and have a lot of wind, but did you just say 55% of the waste is going to come from Idaho and not Los Alamos? Yes. I said, well, New Mexico would like to be a party to that settlement because we disagree. And they said, well, we're announcing it tomorrow. You're too late. I'm like, how am I too late if you just called me? It really bothered me that the way that the Department of Energy was treating New Mexico, to know that 55%. So when I tell you the budget at Los Alamos has dropped, it's dropped because they're surging cleanup in other states. So they started surging cleanup in Idaho, and then they're going to surge cleanup from the Hanford site in Washington next. So I'm going to get to some more of this story, but it really bothered me that I'm learning about these things that were done in backroom deals and not with us. And one of the ways I talk to DOE is you perceive that all roads lead to WIP. Not here in New Mexico, we perceive that all roads lead from WIP. And until you involve New Mexico in every single conversation about every single generator site around the country, you have the wrong people at the table. Until we're at the table, you have nobody at the table. So here we are now, under this notion of DOE is not spending or not appropriating enough money to LANL. They have side agreements going with Idaho and other states. Around that time, we also had renegotiated the consent order, which is a cleanup order for Los Alamos, to put more teeth into it. That has become a problem, and you can guess why it's a problem. How do you comply with a consent order to clean up Los Alamos when your budget is being siphoned and you've created side agreements with other states? Right? You see what I'm saying? That it's not a genuine moment to sign a consent order with New Mexico knowing you're not going to be able to honor the commitments you're making to the people of New Mexico or to the Environment Department. So we have multiple enforcement actions related to things like the hexavalent chromium plume at Los Alamos. But when it comes to the legacy waste, we should hold all the cards. We have the only waste repository in the entire country. Our generations before us agreed, and it's not even generations, we agreed as a state to host the nation's only waste repository. Good, bad, or ugly, this is where we are, right? And yet, most of the waste going to WIP is not coming from New Mexico legacy sites like Los Alamos. So how do we accept the risk to put that waste repository in New Mexico, and yet the waste is coming from everywhere else in the country but our own backyard? It's insulting. You should be infuriated. I still see you there. So I am very angry with a lot of bleeps and expletives. So here's the deal. Then suddenly the WIP permit came up for renewal, and our WIP program manager, Megan McLean, who's in the back of the room, is phenomenal, by the way. Our WIP permit came up for 10-year renewal during our administration, and we said, with many of the advocacy groups in the room, that we would agree that provided WIP focus on legacy waste and build a panel dedicated just to clean up legacy waste, and provided WIP or DOE agree to prioritize Los Alamos, we can renew this permit, right? I was still mad about the call I got in Klein's Corner. I was still mad about budget cuts, but we thought this is going to fix it. This is going to fix it. Guess what? It didn't fix it. And here's why. And this is the part where I think, it's really crystallized for me. So that was about 2023, where we renewed the permit and had those provisions added. In 2022, unbeknownst to the New Mexico Environment Department, I shouldn't say unbeknownst. We knew about it, made news. But DOE signed a contract for a new company to come in and manage the waste isolation pilot plant, to manage WIP. That contract is with a company called Salado Isolation Mining Company. The acronym spells out SIMCO. They signed a contract with SIMCO, $3 billion contract, multiple year contract. That contract does two things, and we should be pissed off about this contract. The contract does two things. It said initially the Department of Energy and SIMCO should build capital projects at WIP to improve its operation. And building those capital projects like ventilation shafts, those are good for workers, by the way. But by building those ventilation shafts or doing those capital projects, they slow down shipments to WIP. We're already behind Idaho. We're already lost money at Los Alamos. And now you're doing capital projects that's going to slow down shipping. We're losing 3 times now. And then on top of that, once the capital projects were finished, the priority or the way you profit, if you're Simcoe, the way you profit off the Department of Energy is you move the easiest waste first. What's that? NNSA waste, pit production waste, waste from Idaho, waste from Hanford, Washington State. You move all this other waste. So this contract on top, so now I'm going to put it all together for you because I know you're bombarded with a lot of information. But I'll tell you, we're doing our homework and we're figuring out the root cause problems here. So I'm putting it together for you. A contract was signed. The contract favors profit over legacy waste. That's 2022. 2023, WIP comes, Department of Energy comes to our door. We agree, legacy waste, LANA will be the priority. They knew what they signed in 2022, we didn't. So now the WIP permit is out there, LANA's budget starts getting cut. We start seeing less waste coming from Los Alamos. In fact, to DOE's credit, I'm going to throw them a bone here, but listen how I throw them this bone. DOE was shipping more waste to LANA before the contract was signed. DOE was shipping more waste from LANA to WIP before the contract, before the WIP permit renewal, and then after we prioritized legacy waste and Los Alamos cleanup, it fell off precipitously. So you think about that, and it calls into question, is this the fact that we have multiple administrations at the federal level changing? Is this that they have 12 different site managers changing compared to our sort of being here? I don't think happenstance here. I think this is a concerted effort to leave Los Alamos high and dry as they pivot from legacy waste cleanup to pit production. They have a very smart trajectory. They just aren't explaining it to us. But guess what? We figured it out. And that's why in early part of this year, in April, we initiated a WIP permit modification on the day that we announced that we are issuing 3 enforcement actions to Los Alamos. So we have about $16 million penalty out there for hexavalent chromium, moving on to San Ildefonso, for we're initiating the WIP permit change to have more teeth and more accountability, to not let them just decide in the course of the evening to just say that MDAC 11-acre landfill with all sorts of chemicals and low-level radioactive waste in it went from inactive status to active because it's next to where they want to invest in doing their pit production. We're fighting that tooth and nail. Because if we don't fight it, I think to the point we heard earlier, we're 85 years out from, or I can't even remember, a century out from when they'll be done with pit production. So we're onto them. We see it. It's bright as day. The sun is shining bright, and we see everything that's happening, and we're intersecting, interrupting, showing up, doing the work it takes to hold them accountable. And why I wanted to share a lot of this information with you, and I'm betting I'm getting close to my time here, but one of the reasons I wanted to share this information with you is because, one, you don't see it from, it's helpful, I hope, to explain it to you as to what we're doing and why we're doing it. And when we democratize that information, when we democratize that data, that is the way we empower you to know how we're thinking and to be involved with us, because we are a public agency. You are the public. We want to work with you to make sure that your hopes and dreams, and not solely your fears about the future, are recognized in the actions we're taking to stand up a Department of Energy that values being in the state of New Mexico. It is an honor for them to be here. We don't, you get how I said that? It's an honor for them to be here in the state of New Mexico. So if they want to be here, then they need to abide by putting New Mexicans first, putting New Mexico first. So your continued advocacy matters. Your continuing to show up matters. You're even showing up to a public hearing, which you may see me on the video conference in Savannah River, in Idaho, in Hanford. You're showing up and saying, I'm from New Mexico, and everything that they're telling the Community Advisory Board is not how we see it here in New Mexico. This is not going to happen on our watch as a citizen or as a government, and we're going to fight back on these issues. I show up to those, I comment. One of the best compliments I got from the National Nuclear Security Administration is, you're very grumpy. And it's because I kept showing up to every hearing they did around the country. They're like, who's this guy from New Mexico showing up? And they kept saying, what can we do better? And I'm like, it's math, guys. It is really math. Move more waste. Put the budget, get the budget up. Stop signing up for things in New Mexico that you can't live up to. And the gall of hearing that they wanted to bring in Russian americium, do you all know about this? That they wanted to bring Russian americium in and store it at the waste isolation pilot plant. It's stored in WIP. Like, you come to New Mexico and stand on a stage and explain that to New Mexicans, because I want to be in the audience for that conversation. But we said absolutely not. No, no, it's a non-starter of a question for us. I think you called the wrong number, actually. So again, I'm happy to be here with you all. I'm happy to participate in the full event. I know the governor's support, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham has given me full authority and supports the work that the Environment Department is doing. So we don't plan to leave the administration without a foundational change to how the federal government is doing business in our state, and hold us accountable to getting us all there. Thank you.
So we have time for questions. Okay. You see them lining up. I think you sparked some interest here.
I wanted to thank you for the work that you're doing, but I also want to ask that you monitor and hold them accountable at LANL for the tritium releases, for their shipments, and that maybe when these things happen, that there's more warning, because last time they were doing the tritium releases, or last time they were doing the shipments, like, roads aren't closed, they're doing it during holidays, and I did complain about it. So there's all that. There's obviously the plume that is going down to San Ildefonso. That is a huge problem and cancer causing. I would ask the Archdiocese, because if I'm part of that history, my great-great-grandfather was one of the architects of the cathedral. I went to school here, as did my grandfather and my great-grandfather and multiple people. So I would ask, me seeing this as the first time that this school has stepped up to really have a greater sense of love for humanity, that this be integrated into the educational system across the board. And then I did want to clarify one thing, okay, and that is that WIT was a pet project of Bill Richardson. Bill Richardson, who was tied to Jeffrey Epstein, and we should never forget that, because the environmental racism that has taken place here has begun since America arrived. There's a whole discussion of what the conquistadores did, which I am also part of, but I am being accountable for. And we need to recognize that so often this has been a sacrifice zone, because we have so many tribes, because we have so many Hispanics. And thank you for being part of our community and stepping up.
Thank totally agree with all the points you raised. And can I just add one other thing that is just to kind of give you a sense of, maybe it's not in direct response, but it's indirect response. You know, the Department of Energy funds a lot of the New Mexico Environment Department's oversight work and even our permit writers in many ways. And the more we're holding them accountable, the more they're saying, maybe we should revisit your grants. Maybe you can't use your grant for this purpose. And I said, get me on the phone with one of your auditors, with your grant specialist. I'm a former Fed, you're a Fed. I'd like to talk to the person in charge, and it's not you. And we haven't had that conversation. They won't produce that person. And then the last thing I'll say in response that I just feel like it needs to be said, and again, it's not really direct. Your comment is evoking it from me. There are, and I'm going to say this, and my general counsel will be so mad at me. There are plenty of people who come up to me in this community and around the state of New Mexico, they tend to be attorneys, and they tend to say things like, thank you for being, doing what you're doing with the Department of Energy, because we're making more money than we've ever made by you suing them and holding them accountable. So when I was in DC, I passed that message along to the Department of Energy. Do you realize your environmental cleanup budget is going to, you're funding, not cleanup, but fighting against cleanup. You're funding attorneys in the state of New Mexico who are thanking me for bringing up their profit by fighting us at the Environment Department to do the things you committed to do. So I want you to all to know that those are some of the conversations that I think we need to put sunlight on so many things like you put sunlight on a moment ago, and I want to continue to put sunlight on that. Thank you.
Next person, please.
Thank you for holding them accountable to the extent that that is possible. Everything you're telling us, which is new to me, makes my blood boil.
Should.
And I'm trying to figure out, I did a story on the Hanford Nuclear Reservation for CBS News 40 years ago, exactly, about their failed cleanup operation and how they'd also poisoned the community with radioactive iodine over the course of 20 years. But I just want to know, what leverage do you have, like you said at the end, possibly trying to cancel grants for what they could do? I have no idea how Richardson or anyone else ever let that in this state to what is now an 85-year permit? Is that true?
No, they have a 10-year permit so there's two things happening concurrently. The waste isolation pilot plant will probably, it gets a 10-year permit from the state of New Mexico, from the Environment Department. There is enough legacy waste around the United States to last until, like, clean up at the rate they're going, 2,100, 2,000, another 75 years, let's say, right? Or more. But your point about leverage is a good one. And I think we have to be prepared as a state, which we've done. This administration has done is, if you cannot meet your compliance obligations to the state of New Mexico, then you still have the obligation to clean up Los Alamos. Good luck with finding where you're going to move the waste isolation pilot plant to. Like, you have a geologic repository here. We need to be a priority for it, and we're going to do everything we can to do that. We've also, for the first time when we renewed the permit, we said that two things that are important for you all to know back in 2023, that if Congress changes the game, meaning that they allow for additional waste in placement at WIP, there's a fixed number in federal statute, that all bets are off, that you can continue to operate the WIP. So we did that, and then we have the waste isolation pilot plant, or DOE, is required to identify other states for a geologic repository. We said not a second geologic repository in New Mexico, identify other states to house the geologic repository, because we know you're going to exceed New Mexico's waste isolation pilot plant availability. So those are the kinds of things that we've you know, we've been doing. I think our governor and myself are not in any way worried about litigating either, and we've been holding them accountable that way.
Well, New Mexico is obviously taking the largest share of the burden for the country. And if they're not putting us in the front of the line to solve our problems, I think everyone here and everyone in the state would be happy to back your efforts publicly. Maybe it will take a referendum. Maybe it will take a PR campaign. But I would just urge you to spread your message and let us help, because hearing what you're saying is very outrageous. Thank you.
Next person, please.
Hello, my name is Roberto Levan. I was born and raised here in New Mexico. We know the pig production at Los Alamos, it's contaminating all our lands, the Cod del Rio. We have the Embudo Valley downwinders because they're getting contaminated all the slope of the Rio Grande. But right now, the DOE and NNSA are planning to build 30 pits a year at Llano. And they were also planning to build 50 pits a year at Savannah River. But I guess Savannah River folks, they have better senators. Now they want to move those 50 pits here. So they want to build 80 pits a year here. What is the state going to do? What is NME going to do? And what can we do to stop that?
Good question, and thank you for the question. You know, one of the things I have when Jay showed his slide about the investments in Los Alamos, one of my fears after being in the job as long as I have and seeing how DOE sort of changes, and I say change around in different presidential moments, is they might be investing in Los Alamos today for pig production, but will they be exporting all those jobs out of the state and sort of leaving additional legacy? We have Manhattan waste, Manhattan Project waste, we have Cold War waste. Are we going to have even more waste, and then they can sort of move the production back to South Carolina? I'm not advocating for more pig production here. I'm just saying I worry about those kinds of things. The Environment Department doesn't have a lot of regulatory authority under the Atomic Energy Act to do much about pig production. We do have a lot of authority when it comes to the waste isolation pilot plant, and our leverage, our ace in the hole, is actually, I think, the fact that WIP is here, but their problem, or the way they've been operating, is they keep putting us last. And that's why I feel like, to the gentleman who spoke just before you, the more we're understanding and can just talk about this really complex issue, like, why is Idaho and Washington ahead of us in line? We're hosting the only repository. Why do you keep signing things? Why do you keep cutting budgets? Why do you have a for-profit company making profit off of keeping waste in the ground at Los Alamos? Like, it's the upside down. It's all wrong for us. So I don't know that I can answer your question to say, how do we stop pig production? I hate answers like this from government people, but it is a little above my pay grade, because we don't have regulatory authority for that directly. So it's not a satisfying answer, but it's an honest one.
Unfortunately, we are out of time, and I apologize because I know the interest here is high, and if I had my way, I'd say let's just go for another hour, but somehow they haven't given me that power yet, Archbishop, right? So I know that there will be people in the lobby, and if Mr. Kenny can speak to them?
Yep.
Okay?
Thank you.
Because we've been asked, like, what can you do? What can you do? And so we're going to have a call to action, and we're going to have to make it a little brief. Thank you. So just as Anne's getting to the microphone, to make it easier for everyone, because we know the interest is high, we actually have a couple of sheets at the various tables, so you don't have to try to remember everything that you heard, but that you will have a written list of actions that you can take. Take it away, Anne.
Okay, that is correct. There is a sheet front and back with about 6 different calls to action. Firstly, we have two from the Tularosa Basin Downwinders Consortium that are RECA related. One has to do with the New Mexico Tumor Registry not sharing records that they keep on the people of New Mexico. So that's an obstacle in RECA claims. Second one has to do with extending and expanding RECA. Then we have two calls to action for Nuclear Watch New Mexico, and I'm going to add to that Jay's request that we all support Secretary Kenny to the max. Also, and they don't have a table, I don't believe, but at the top of the back of this, there is a half-page thing from the Pueblo Action Alliance. The bottom line is, today is the final day to get your comments in for a public hearing regarding the Roca Honda uranium mine, so please do that. And then lastly, please visit the back from the brink table and sign our petition so we can progress with our legislation to get the policy claims passed. That is all I'm going to say. Go forth and be active.
And now, Archbishop, please help us close with a prayer and conclusion. Thank you.
We're ready. Thank you very much, David. Thank you enough to take our money to practice. We appreciate all your hard work. And all our staff, all the staff, all those who spoke, all of the presenters, thank you so much, Dr. Briggs, Jay. Thank you, everybody, for all that you've done and for your participation. And I have to say that Secretary Kenny, if anybody was really down on government, you bring us way back up again. It's so good to have secretaries like that fighting for us. What a great, and his staff, how blessed we are to have them. So thanks be to God for all of us for this effort today. We lift up all of our prayers for our different traditions and faith and ask the Lord to bless our efforts and to keep us as instruments of peace, as St. Francis would have us do. Amen. God bless you all.